The Sword and the Stone, Chapter 17. I think it must be time, said Merlin, looking at him over the top of his spectacles one afternoon, that you had another dose of education. That is, as time goes. It was an afternoon in early spring, and everything outside the window looked beautiful. The winter mantle had gone, taking with it Sir Grummer, Master Twidey, King Pellinore, and the questing beast, the latter having revived under the influence of kindliness and bread and milk. It had bounded off into the snow with every sign of gratitude, to be followed 2 hours later by the excited king, and the watchers from the battlements had observed it confusing its snowy footprints most ingeniously as it reached the edge of the chase. It was running backward, bounding 20 foot sideways, rubbing out its marks with its tail, climbing along horizontal branches, and performing many other tricks with evident enjoyment. They had also seen King Pellinore, who had dutifully kept his eyes shut and counted 10,000 while this was going on, becoming quite confused when he arrived at the difficult spot, and finally galloping off in the wrong direction, with his brachet trailing behind him. It was a lovely afternoon. Outside the schoolroom window, the larches of the distant forest had already taken on the fullness of their dazzling green. The earth twinkled and swelled with a million drops, and every bird in the world had come home to court and sing. The village folk were forth in their gardens every evening, planting garden beans, and it seemed that, what with these emergencies and those of the slugs, coincidentally with the beans, the buds, the lambs, and the birds, every living thing had conspired to come out. "What would you like to be?" asked Merlin. Wart looked out of the window, listening to the thrush's twice-done song of dew. He said, "I have been a bird once, but it was only in the mews at night, and I never got a chance to fly. Even if one ought not to do one's education twice, do you think I could be a bird, so as to learn about that?" He had been bitten with the craze for birds which bites all sensible people in the spring, and which sometimes even leads to excesses like birds nesting. "I can see no reason why you should not," said the magician. "But why not try it at night?" "But they will be asleep at night." "All the better chance of seeing them without their flying away. You could go with Archimedes this evening, and he would tell you about them." "Would you do that, Archimedes?" "I should love to," said the owl. "I was feeling like a little saunter myself." "Do you know," asked the wart, thinking of the thrush, "why birds sing, or how? Is it a language?" "Of course it is a language. It is not a big language like human speech, but it is large." "Gilbert White," said Merlin, "remarks, or will remark, however you like to put it, that the language of birds is very ancient, and like other ancient modes of speech, little is said, but much is intended. He also says somewhere that the rooks in the breeding season attempt sometimes, in the gaiety of their hearts, to sing, but with no great success." "I love rooks," said the wart. "It is funny, but I think they are my favorite bird." "Why?" asked Archimedes. "Well, I like them. I like their sauce." "Neglectful parents," quoted Merlin, who was in a scholarly mood, "and saucy, perverse children." "It is true," said Archimedes, reflectively, "that all the Corvidae have a distorted sense of humor." Wart explained, "I love the way they enjoy flying. They don't just fly like other birds, but they fly for fun. It is lovely when they hoist home to bed in a flock at night, all cheering, and making rude remarks and pouncing on each other in a vulgar way. They turn over on their backs sometimes, and tumble out of the air, just to be ridiculous, or else because they have forgotten they are flying, and have coarsely began to scratch themselves for fleas, without thinking about it." "They are intelligent birds," said Archimedes, "in spite of their low humor. They are one of the birds that have parliaments, you know, and a social system." "Do you mean they have laws?" "Certainly they have laws. They meet in the autumn, in a field, to talk them over." "What sorts of laws?" "Oh, well, laws about the defense of the rookery, and marriage, and so forth. You are not allowed to marry outside the rookery, and, if you do become quite lost to all sense of decency, and bring back a sable virgin from a neighboring settlement, then everybody pulls your nest to pieces as fast as you can build it up. They make you go into the suburbs, you know, and that is why every rookery has outlying nests all round it, several trees away." "Another thing I like about them," said the wart, "is their go. They may be thieves and practical jokers, and they do quarrel and bully each other in a squawky way, but they have got the courage to mob their enemies. I should think it takes some courage to mob a hawk, even if there is a pack of you. And even while they are doing it, they clown. They are mobs, said Archimedes loftily. You have said the word. Well, they are larky mobs anyway, said the wart, and I like them. What is your favorite bird? Asked Merlin politely to keep the peace. Archimedes thought this over for some time and then said, Well, it is a large question. It is rather like asking you what is your favorite book. On the whole, however, I think that I must prefer the pigeon. To eat? I was leaving that side of it out, said the owl in civilized tones. Actually, the pigeon is the favorite dish of all raptors, if they are big enough to take her, but I was thinking of nothing but domestic habits. Describe them. The pigeon, said Archimedes, is a kind of Quaker. She dresses in gray. A dutiful child, a constant lover, and a wise parent, she knows, like all philosophers, that the hand of every man is against her. She has learned throughout the centuries to specialize in escape. No pigeon has ever committed an act of aggression, nor turned upon her persecutors. But no bird, likewise, is so skillful in eluding them. She has learned to drop out of a tree on the opposite side to man, and to fly low so that there is a hedge between them. No other bird can estimate a range so well. Vigilant, powdery, odorous, and loose-feathered, so that dogs object to take them in their mouths. Armored against pellets by the padding of these feathers, the pigeons coo to one another with true love, nourish their cunningly hidden children with true solicitude, and flee from the aggressor with true philosophy. A race of peace lovers continually caravanning away from the destructive Indian in covered wagons. They are loving individualists surviving against the forces of massacre only by wisdom in escape. Did you know, added Archimedes, that a pair of pigeons always roost head to tail so that they can keep a lookout in both directions? I know our tame pigeons do, said the wart. I suppose the reason why people are always trying to kill them is because they are so greedy. What I like about wood pigeons is the clap of their wings, and how they soar up and close their wings and sink during their courting flights, so that they fly rather like woodpeckers. It is not very like woodpeckers, said Merlin. No, it is not, admitted the wart. And what is your favorite bird? Asked Archimedes, feeling that his master ought to be allowed a say. Merlin put his fingers together like Sherlock Holmes, and replied immediately, I prefer the chaffinch. My friend Linus calls him colebs or bachelor birds. The flocks have the sense to separate during the winter, so that all the males are in one flock and all the females in the other. For the winter months, at any rate, there is perfect peace. The conversation, observed Archimedes, arose out of whether birds could talk. Another friend of mine, said Merlin immediately in his most learned voice, maintains, or will maintain, that the question of the language of birds arises out of imitation. Aristotle, you know, also attributes tragedy to imitation. Archimedes sighed heavily and remarked in prophetic tones, You had better get it off your chest. It is like this, said Merlin. The kestrel drops upon a mouse, and the poor mouse, transfixed with those needle talons, cries out in agony, his one squeal of kee. Next time the kestrel sees a mouse, his own soul cries out kee in imitation. Another kestrel, perhaps his mate, comes to that cry, and after a few million years, all the kestrels are calling each other with their individual note of kee, kee, kee. You can't make the whole story out of one bird, said the wart. I don't want to. The hawks scream like their prey, the mallards croak like the frogs they eat, the shrikes also, like these creatures in distress. The blackbirds and thrushes click like the snail shells they hammer to pieces. The various finches make the noise of cracking seeds, and the woodpecker imitates the tapping on wood, which he makes to get the insects that he eats. But all birds don't give a single note. No, of course not. The call note arises out of imitation, and then the various bird songs are developed by repeating the call note and decanting upon it. I see, said Archimedes coldly. And what about me? Well, you know quite well, said Merlin, that the shrew mouse you pounce upon squeals out, "Queek!" This is why the young of your species call "Kiwick." "And the old?" inquired Archimedes sarcastically. "Hurroo! Hurroo!" cried Merlin, refusing to be damped. "It is obvious, my dear fellow. After their first winter, that is the wind in the hollow trees where they prefer to sleep." "I see," said Archimedes, more coolly than ever. "This time we note it is not a question of prey at all." "Oh, come along," replied Merlin. "There are other things besides the things you eat. Even a bird drinks sometimes, for instance, or bathes itself in water. It is the liquid notes of a river that we hear in a robin's song." "It seems now," said Archimedes, "that it is no longer a question of what we eat, but also what we drink or hear." "And why not?" The owl said resignedly, "Oh, well." "I think it is an interesting idea," said the wart, to encourage his tutor. "But how does a language come out of these imitations?" "They repeat them at first," said Merlin, "and then they vary them. You don't seem to realize what a lot of meaning there resides in the tone and the speed of voice. Suppose I were to say, 'What a nice day,' just like that. You would answer, 'Yes, so it is.' But if I were to say, 'What a nice day,' in caressing tones, you might think I was a nice person. But then again, if I were to say, 'What a nice day,' quite breathless, you might look about you to see what had put me in a fright. It is like this that the birds have developed their languages." "Would you mind telling us," said Archimedes, "since you know so much about it, how many various things we birds are able to express by altering the tempo and emphasis of the elaborations of our call notes?" "But a large number of things. You can cry Kiwick in tender accents if you are in love, or Kiwick angrily in challenge or in hate. You can cry it on a rising scale as a call note if you do not know where your partner is, or to attract their attention away if strangers are straying near your nest. If you go near the old nest in the winter time, you may cry Kiwick lovingly, a conditioned reflex from pleasures which you once enjoyed within it. And if I come near to you in a startling way, you may cry out Kiwick, Kiwick, Kiwick in loud alarm." "When we come to conditioned reflexes," remarked Archimedes sourly, "I prefer to look for a mouse." "So you may. And when you find it, I dare say you will make another sound characteristic of owls, though not often mentioned in books of ornithology. I refer to the sound tok, or t, which human beings call a smacking of the lips." "And what sound is that supposed to imitate?" "Obviously the breaking of mousy bones." "You are a cunning master," said Archimedes, "and as far as a poor owl is concerned, you will just have to get away with it. All I can tell you from my personal experience is that it is not like that at all. A tit can tell you not only that it is in danger, but what kind of danger it is in. It can say, 'Look out for the cat,' or 'Look out for the hawk,' or 'Look out for the tawny owl,' as plainly as ABC." "I don't deny it," said Merlin. "I'm only telling you the beginnings of the language. Suppose you try to tell me the song of any single bird which I can't attribute originally to imitation." "The nightjar," said the wart. "The buzzing of the wings of beetles," replied his tutor at once. "The nightingale," cried Archimedes desperately. "Ah," said Merlin, leaning back in his comfortable chair. "Now we are to imitate the soul song of our beloved Proserpine, as she stirs to wake in all her liquid self." "True," said the wart softly. "Pew," added the owl quietly. "Music," concluded the necromancer in ecstasy, unable to make the smallest beginnings of an imitation. "Hello," said Kay, opening the door of the afternoon schoolrooms. "I'm sorry I'm late for the geography lesson. I was trying to get a few small birds with my crossbow. Look, I've killed a thrush.